Oh, oh.
Right.
Okay, we tweeted out the link and the whole nine. Okay, so if you go to YouTube, if you just make sure to mute the stream, you can pop at the live chat if you're interested in seeing the live chat. I don't know. I can see the live chat as it goes to StreamYard. I don't know if you can see that as well.
I can. I'm looking at it right now.
Okay, it should be an interesting conversation. So here's what we're going to do. First of all, folks, on a technical point, if I sound muted or muffled at all, my microphone that I was so happy with is giving me problems, right? It's the story of my life. So I'm using the original like webcam microphone. So hopefully everything is okay. And then also that's just a start. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to kind of travel through the middle, and then we'll get to the end. And when I say start at the beginning, Bret was one of the first YouTubers that I was following and kind of inspired me to start my YouTube channel. I was following Project Camelot, all the various whistleblowers, the contactees, the AI, that strange new evolving world between conspiracy theory and New Age, for want of a better term, spirituality and metaphysics. And I found a guy that hit the nail right on the head for me. It was Bret Bernhoft, and what he was doing was he was basically serializing and producing digest videos of these long form internet radio broadcasts. Back then, on YouTube, there was Project Camelot, yes, but a lot of the YouTube videos and content you would find covering Alex Collier, following David Icke, etc., were basically just uploads of what was a predecessor to podcasts, these internet radio shows. So it was the same story. It was 2 hour long broadcast, and Bret would bring it down into 10 or 15 minutes. There was an evolution on that channel, for sure. Sometimes he would change up his style. I still remember the famous "I discovered the edit button" video.
I don't remember that button, but I'm sure I would remember if I saw it. Um,
It kind of lets you do cut ups, so you were like doing this kind of avant garde.
the highly edited videos that I was doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Crazy stuff. And then we had a famous encounter where I was so stoked that I was going to finally meet Bret. It was on an episode of the Psychic Vampires podcast. It was the first one that I was ever on, and I don't think either me or Bret really kind of understood the context of what that podcast was about. I was also hammered. That was back in my days of heavy, heavy drinking. So I'm stoked. I think I knew that there was a slight controversy, brewing between you and Michael. I was aware of Michael's work generally, but not so familiar that I thought it was going to be anything other than maybe a debate. I didn't know it was going to be, you know, the uh, the insane thing. So right before we start, the podcast the podcast stream, whatever you want to call it, was happening. I was there BSing with Doc Savage and Ronaldinho and Michael Amnieros, and they say, "Okay, Bret's here." And I was like, okay, cool. I'm finally going to meet Bret Bernhoft. And we start, and I'm able to say hello. And within moments of me saying hello, Michael starts like screaming at you. And the whole thing turns into this incredible F show. You said, I know it. I get it. I'm a dead man here. You don't like me. And then immediately left the stream. And I was like, great. And then shortly thereafter, you made some personal videos about, your journey with, exploring different things, and then you pieced out. I think there were times where you came back. You're one of those guys. There are people that I stay subscribed to, even though I see it go by. 1 year they haven't uploaded. 2 years go by they haven't uploaded. But I dare not unsubscribe because at any moment the guy could come back. And I'm also another guy that's famous for like turning off my channel all the time. But I last like 2 hours. You can last 2.5 years. So when I think I saw you once or twice in the live chat, and then I saw you pop up in the live chat a couple of weeks ago, and it immediately started this conversation. I started talking to people about, live, about just one-sided conversation about the history, what I remember, what kind of happened, and and yeah, and then we immediately made plans to set up this conversation. And given the fact that I answer my email like it's the Pony Express, right? You send a letter out to me in the winter in the hopes that dearest Benjamin, I hope this email finds you in springtime. You know what I mean? And I write back, Poor Clancy has died of the clap, whatever the case may be. Though that's, well, we got it. We're here. We're here now. We're here now, and I'm very stoked to have this conversation take place. And I'm also stoked that there's going to be more Bret Bernhoft content on YouTube. Currently, all that's up there is that famous crazy podcast, a video of Michael talking to you in an out, like basically monologuing to you in an alley briefly, and this a video that you made, an interview you made just at the close of last year regarding transhumanism, and you self-identified as liking transhumanism and being, you know, you said some very interesting things about your exploration of it, including I know there's a transhumanist movement within the Mormon Church. I also, got turned on through this interview to the concept of cosmism.
Hmm.
I'd been familiar with Ben Grotzel before. I'd seen him a couple times, mainly talking about cryptocurrency, but also, Sophia. So there's the beginning. What I'm missing is, and we have the beginning and we have the end. So we have the bookends of where this conversation can go. But I think we're going to have to rely on you to provide the middle. Where you've been, what's going on, how this kind of transformation took place, and then we can kick the idea of transhumanism around, which I think will be fascinating. I think it will be fascinating for us as individuals, and I think it'll also be fascinating for the community because this community, for want of a better term, like what is the community? Where are the boundaries? But a lot of the if you say transhumanism in the world of David Icke, Alex Collier, Alex Jones, Project Camelot, you're going to get a lot of that's the most evil, wicked, crazy, terrible thing that could possibly happen. It's part of the Cabal Illuminati agenda, and and so I think that'll be interesting to talk about. I don't know if you're still plugged into the scene, if you still follow things, or what.
Hmm.
Why don't we do this? I gave my little nutshell take on, how this started, how I discovered you, what you were doing then, from my perspective and point of view, and the simple podcast, Psychic Vampires podcast. I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to go on a psychic vampire, but anyway, that's water under the bridge. Can you start off by telling us? I gave a little nutshell. I talked a little bit about your YouTube work as it started. Is there anything that I'm missing that you think, for context, makes sense for you to talk about? Where you were then, what was going on?
Definitely. I mean, I'm an honest person. I'd like to think I'm an honest person, especially in these kinds of circumstances on these issues. So I'll say that I was not. I wanted Michael to destroy me. I needed him to bite me in the neck like a vampire and kill me. Not literally, but I was headed towards a worse place if I hadn't met Michael. I'm very grateful that I did meet Michael, and I mean, I had a horrible time that night. Well, to be honest with you, now that it's outside of the 2 years, I was very, very nervous for 2 years that I was going to get sued for some of the content that I made on YouTube. And then after the door closed on that window of opportunity, nope. So I'm fine. So I can talk about that now. But I was in a pretty hardcore negative position in my life then. I was completely in poverty. I guess you could say, an alcoholic myself. Wasn't taking my medications properly, and I was unstable and looking for a fight. And I found it real easy with Michael. Um, I don't regret fighting Michael because I got what I needed out of it, and that was him to basically tear me apart and cause me to go away. And it was after when I closed out that stream, that was 5 years ago essentially, and that was the last time I really appeared on YouTube, except for the one interview that you found from last year. And it was a major uh, event in my life that night. It transformed me. I was um, totally terrified of what I was going into. And I'm very grateful that Michael destroyed me that night because it gave me a chance to reset. And in the 5 years since that night, I have I went down a different journey the spring of the year after, and it was computer programming. And I taught myself to program computers and develop for the web. And my life is now that I've taken on technology as sort of my bread and butter. And I can go into the details of the last 5 years anytime, any details you want to talk about or any length you want me to talk about it, I will. But to summarize the whole last 5 years, it's been um, sacrificing everything to educate myself, to learn how to program computers, to get a job, which I finally got 6 months ago. I got a life changing job that totally created a renaissance in my life, and put me on the best track I have ever been on. So um, life is life is excellent and beautiful in my world these days, despite everything that's going on. Um, but the last 5 years have been the most transformative. I've got to do this, or I'm going to fail for the rest of my life. Period. My entire life. I'm 35 now. I was 30, basically 30, when that event happened, and um, it was enough reason for me to pick myself up and move forward in a better way. I mean, that's just the simplest way of saying it. Is that um, I hold zero ill will to anyone on that podcast. Anyone who teased or ridiculed, I did the same thing. So I have zero ill will to anyone that might might have done ill to me in any way that I might have perceived it at the time. It's unnecessary because I received a gift that night, and it's not sort of like a it was like gnosis in a way.
Yeah, so if we could explore that a little, because that's fascinating. Do you, at the time that you did this self-immolation, because I remember what the controversy was, is that there was something, Michael was obviously going off after people in the kind of the metaphysical psychic community, targeted individuals, and my memory of this was that you had done, whether it was organic or honest, or whether it was some sort of performance art. I think you did a video where you channeled his higher self or something.
I I I I put as much value in that experience and any related experience like that today as I did then. They're just as real as they were then, and they can be just as real today again. But you're right. I connected with what I interpreted to be the energy of Michael, and I said some horrible, um, uninsightful, derogatory things about the man, and I didn't even know that. I only had the suspicion through the same techniques that I channeled ET consciousness with in my videos. I used, or at least connected with ET consciousness in my videos. I did the same thing with Michael, and so it wasn't new to me what I was doing, but my approach and my motivation were unworthy of the activity, and were definitely something I haven't done since then. I learned I learned quite a bit that night from Michael after he destroyed me.
So now, but was it a self when you went into the? And I think it's interesting to talk about the ET channeling thing, because channeling becomes a little bit of a conversation here on my channel frequently, and I regard it as ritual and performance art, and there are people that I talk to in the channeling community that are understand me, and there's people that think that I'm the devil. But when you did that channeling, did you go, and is it just, is the note, did the gnosis come like after the fact? Did you have to process the experience to say that you got something out of it? Or was there any point prior to the psychic vampirism, that you went in saying, I'm going into this with the desire? The desire, was it after the fact that you realized that maybe subconsciously you were orchestrating this outplay?
That's a great question. It probably was minorly on my mind prior to it. During the event, there was a moment when um, I knew exactly why I was there, and why I had been so motivated to go on to Michael's channel. And it was in that moment that I realized I want to self sabotage right now. I want to be destroyed because I'm in so much pain, and I don't want this anymore. So Michael, please do your thing. And he invited me on the show, and I gladly accepted. I had a feeling it was a setup, but I just ignored that. I had a feeling there was going to be some ulterior motive, but um, that ulterior motive was true in the sense of it seemed to be. But I'm just glad that it happened the way it did, even though it was painful.
You mentioned the fear of going away because you feared getting sued. Did you fear getting sued because of the channeling Michael session, or were there other things that made you think that you were gonna be sued?
There was other content that I had created that I thought might have been enough. It was libel. It was enough to get me sued. It was motivation of the other person whether or not they wanted to sue me, and they didn't. I haven't heard back from anyone of that concern in over 5 years, and the window of opportunity in my state for suing is 2 years. So it's I can talk about that. Yeah.
There you So do you mind me asking? Because when I think of Bret Bernhoft, I don't think of any content that you could sue. When you started saying fear of getting sued, I thought one of two things: either it was the Michael interview, the Michael thing, the channeling thing that you might have thought was libel, or or maybe it was a content issue, because you were doing like digest videos of stuff. Do you mind me asking? Because it sounds like it was something else entirely.
It was something different than Michael. It was a. Do you remember the? I will just as politely and congenially describe the individual as the lady that was present that night with the husband.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Gee.
I made a
I
video. I made a video about her or to her that was very derogatory, and I think she's a lawyer. I think she's a professional of some sort in the law field. Her husband or her partner is definitely spiritually mature, so he can definitely put two and two together as my motivations. And it was those two individuals who I had said something unfortunate to in a video that I uploaded that I took down immediately, but someone had captured the video and sent it to them. So they saw it when it was offline. So that's the only possible way. And I do regret that video, not because I could have gotten sued, but because it was so malicious. I don't agree with that anymore. I don't make malicious content like that anymore. It's just untasteful.
I have a feeling that what you regard as malicious content was, I don't know, like everyone's got their own standards. It's funny you mentioned getting sued. I'm being sued by Corey Good. Did you know that?
I had no idea.
No, he's suing me. Well, I'll send you the legal action. It's crazy. I have over $15,000 in attorney's fees. So
Wow.
leaving YouTube because of the fear of getting sued. But I remember those cats. I mean, he started off as a flat earther, and my understanding is that they had a citrus farm in Mexico. But who knows? At this point, they're long gone. I also remember they made a video about me, mocking and making fun of me. So who knows? Anywho, so you go on this, you leave and you go on this 5-year journey. um and then you mentioned, not, using the medication properly. We talked about this before. You don't mind, you've self-identified on the internet as neurodivergent. Do you want to talk about any sort of more specific, diagnosis that you have, or what your journey with that was? Because you mentioned this tough patch where you weren't taking the medication properly. Do you think that that's part of your journey that's worth exploring? Not necessarily that you're comfortable talking about it, because you did mention being an open book, and you've been an open book so far, but I don't know if you think that it's germane to the conversation.
Totally. You want to know the bigger picture, and transhumanism is kind of the meta theme, and what I'm about to share is very relevant. Just as an example, just to answer your question, diagnosis wise, I was diagnosed with ADD, OCD, and bipolar type 2 at the age of 21, and autism about 3 or 4 years later. And those diagnoses gave me a lot of clarity. I'm not ashamed of my diagnoses now. I manage my disposition with medications and a lifestyle that makes it possible to thrive. I just that's just the way it works now. It didn't always work that way, and um, when I first learned I had bipolar disorder, I was shocked. I was overwhelmed, but eventually, I actually started an online community. It was my first online community before YouTube. It was on Facebook, and the name of the community was Being Bipolar. And I had like 200,000 people in that community, and I did a podcast and had blog posts and interviews and T-shirts and all sorts of things. And um, I'm not ashamed to say that I'm neurally diverse, but it's been a struggle, that's for sure. And it's now just part of the background noise in my world because of some journey to maturation, I guess you could say.
Right. You mentioned lifestyle choices. I mean, medications are medications, but is there anything like specific that you would kind of generally recommend to anybody who might find themselves in the same position that you were, and got you better?
That's I would say what worked for me. I think it's safe not to recommend in this kind of stuff, but I will say what worked for me is a vegetable based but not exclusive diet. That's probably the biggest thing, is eating a healthy diet, and stopping drinking alcohol. That was another big thing for me. Alcohol was it inflamed and ravaged my body and soul when I was drinking it. And now that I'm sober, I've been sober basically 3 or 4 years. It's doesn't even, it's not part of my reality anymore. So to answer that question, is diet is important to me. So maybe that'll help someone.
Right. No, absolutely. So you mentioned not drinking. No, do you consider yourself in recovery? Do you participate in any recovery community, or did you just handle it yourself?
Me and my cat, we handled it together. I swear it. I had a night where I was basically, I had to make a choice. Do I want to quit? Do I want to go? My cat came in, laid down on my chest, and together we decided I wasn't going to drink anymore. I broke through, and since then I have had a couple of drinks, but I figure instead of fighting against it completely, I will relinquish control every now and then, as long as I can regain sobriety. And the thing is that I can, because of the that night. It was a bigger event in my life than I thought, and it also came after Michael, which is one of the reasons why I think Michael kind of freed me from a lot of my past self.
Do you experience that interaction with Michael as taking place on any sort of a metaphysical plane, or was it just kind of like a Jungian kind of psychological mindset?
Interesting question. I would say that if there was any metaphysical force at play, it would be karma, and it would have been strong karma on both our turns. He was very eager to take advantage or to do his job, maybe, and I was very eager to have a job done unto me. So it was probably mutual karma.
Very good. There you go. So we got to computer programming. I mean, I think that we got the online community you mentioned on Facebook. Is it still a going concern that either you participate in or exists free of you?
It no, it does not exist.
Okay.
It stopped. I shut it down because it's a whole episode of my life that I basically cracked the Facebook ad code and grew a community of 200,000 people for about $3,000 in ads, which is pretty unprecedented in my experience. And then Facebook got wise, took away the ads, and the entropy of Facebook caused my community to constantly dwindle in size. The ads were promoting it. Facebook is, in my experience, a lot of entropy. You bring your audience there, and it sucks up the value. You have to pay them for it to get it back, kind of thing. Any momentum, at least. At least that was my experience. And I shut it down because the Facebook page became very poisonous. A lot of politics, a lot of anti this, anti pro that, and it just wasn't working for me. And I was the only one in charge of it, so I made the executive decision just to hit the delete button, and it was the right choice.
But because we talked about metaphysical concerns, and we just talked about Facebook and the entropy. It's been my experience. I'll just throw this against the wall because we're going to end up talking about AI and we're going to end up talking about transhumanism. I have a concept, where basically the internet is a space where kind of the occult, if it didn't exist before, becomes real. The notion of traveling in an astral space with an avatar, taking on a persona, the invocation, evocation of certain gods. And I also have this conception of the internet maybe having a personality, and certainly these individual websites being like either, depending on your definition or point of view, maybe spirits or tulpas or entities onto themselves. Like it seems like every website, whether it's just because of the interaction of people there or the way that it's framed or formatted or promotes things or boosts things, develops their own kind of personalities. Like I know that Discord is the place you go if you want to do evil behind the scenes that will eventually come to light because somebody's recording something somewhere. Twitter is where everybody loses their head and starts basically hurling feces like monkeys at each other at the drop of a hat. And Facebook is where you go now if you're a grandmother that wants to be indoctrinated into some bizarre neo-fascist cult. Do you have any sort of, have you ever thought things like that, or do you have any kind of feedback to just that idea being thrown out there?
100%. I should say that I totally embrace that idea. Um, I also on Reddit started a subreddit that still exists. It's under different management now. I got cursed and had to leave, but I will share you a link or share a link to it in chat. Maybe is that all right? I'll share a link to it so that people can find it. But it's our Cyberdelenaut, and what it is the mixture of psychedelics, cyber, and magic. And when you put those three together, what kind of a community can you develop? And I'm going to go to your YouTube page right now, if you don't mind. I can't hear you. CW, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I apologize. I forgot I was muted.
Correct.
If you see the private chat for us where you put your link for wherebret.com, if you put it there, I'll just copy it into the live chat here. Because it'll go out on from me, it'll go onto Twitch and everything. So there you go. I copy that link. Okay. Do the comments and I do this. Paste.
Yep. So that was a fun adventure. That I grew the community by hand without any ads, by sharing memes, by making and sharing memes over the course of about 2 months, and I got pretty far into it. And then I know I got cursed by multiple people because they got very angry with me. I started getting into conspiracy theories again. I started getting into politics and just observations about where the world is. And it was right when COVID hit, so it was sort of a stress moment in the world that we were at. And I got a lot of negative feedback from a lot of negative energetic feedback in a very concentrated period of time from the universe. And every time I would log on to the internet, I would basically feel like I was on fire. So I had to delete my Reddit account, and the feelings of crisis went away in my life. But or so the most active member on that community took over as the subreddit mod, and he does an excellent, or they do, I don't know if it's a he, I've never known the person's name, but they do an excellent job of keeping things intact and keeping it moving forward. So there's about probably 62, last time I looked there was 6,150 subreddit members, and almost all of them I would assume are that intersection audience between psychedelics, technology, and magic. And that is basically why I'm interested in transhumanism, is because transhumanism, we'll talk about that in a bit if you want to, of course, but transhumanism is magical in my opinion. It's not, I'm not interested in transhumanism for the eugenics or for the racial superiority of any particular group, or supremacy of any particular group. I am interested in it because it is a, I'll just say this and we can move on and come back to it. It is a well-rounded, established philosophy of opportunity for the future that is happening right now. And human potential is what I'm interested in ultimately. Human potential, not purity or anything like that. It's just what each individual can become. For me, my potential is flourishing through technology, and that's what transhumanism is about. So I'm very pursuant of that.
Well, yeah, it's one of these things when talking about these things gets complex because like the metaphysics of magic itself is like this conversation that, and then if you add in the technological space and the spirits on the internet and all that stuff, because it's like I try to explain to some people sometimes, like I used to say that like I've got one foot in the rational scientific community, one foot in the new age woo woo community. But then
Right.
I'm like, the thoughts and ideas that I have in the new age woo woo community, like you can't deny their existence. Like if I use the old school mythological language of spirits or demons or trickster gods, it's still being applied to something that in form and function, even if it's like a Frankenstein monster with no brain, is acting that way. One question that peaked up for me when we were talking about this just now was, you mentioned learning how to be a computer programmer. You've obviously seen the way that these things can operate, the way that these programs or websites or social media sites can operate. Have you ever thought or given any thought to like if there's a white magic of computer programming that you could do to make something better, or is that just like you haven't thought about that, or just maybe you think it's not possible? I don't know.
Are you asking, can I use white magic within web development to cause effect?
Yeah, or like if you have any desire either to actively maybe create a space that would, or I don't know if you have any desire to develop a social media app, but have you given any thought to how it might work or function well, or is that something interested you're in exploring, or just in the general thing what you said, the using of programming to perform magic or to engage in that practice?
Interesting question. The answer is yes, definitely. I have already used white magic in my web development. I should say this right off the bat, that I do not use magic in my employment, because that I think is that's foreboding in my perception. So I use magic in my personal web development, and a lot of it is like when I'm using JavaScript, which is sort of the programming language of the web. I program with magic numbers like 13, 43, 23, 7, sometimes 6, values that bring about magic results. And I find that there is a little bit to that. I haven't yet set out on the quest that I've wanted to for a long time, and that is to do exactly what you've said. That's to create that magical space on the internet for either my development, my promotion, or a community of people to actually start getting serious about it. But what I will do is I'll share very quickly with you in our private chat that you can share out. It's a website that I learned a lot about, technomancy101.com. Technomancy is the kind of it's cybermancy. Technomancy is the kind of magic that we're talking about, and I'm going to paste this right now. That is the website that I taught myself with how to do a lot of stuff. This website that I just shared with you, technomancy101.com. I have no affiliation with this website whatsoever. I did not build this site or anything, just read it. This is the first kind of website of its kind that I've ever found. And it's a well organized sort of introduction on how to use technology in your magic or vice versa. So that website is the beginning of it, actually inspired the Reddit community that I built. Because it's like, fine, someone's finally putting the effort into this. I'm not as good at it as they are, but they did it. So they're going to crack that egg. I'll take it a step further. And now we're talking about it, that it's on the screen. That's sort of another stage for the whole subject.
Okay, very interesting. So then also if we talk about magic, there was someone in the live chat asking about your knowledge regarding the transhumanist movement within Mormonism. I know it's like not like a widespread thing. It's a kind of a singular community, no pun intended. Speaking of, we saw that I saw that interview that you did December of 2020, where you talked about some of the stuff. Do you feel that it's germane to kind of do a brief exploration of that stuff? Because it sounded like that was part of the beginning of your transhumanist journey.
Certainly. The gentleman's name is, I believe, Lincoln Cannon. He founded the I believe it's Lincoln Cannon. He founded the Mormon Transhumanist Association. I believe that's what it's called. And if I was to ever have a Judeo-Christian faith, if I was to ever adopt one, to be honest with you, after hearing and studying the Mormon afterlife, I would probably become a Mormon because of their belief in exponential, infinite opportunity for each uh, Mormon couple to basically populate their own planet. It's an incredibly psychedelic uh, afterlife theory. But that said, I'm not a Judeo-Christian person, and I won't be because I just don't have that compatibility in my genes, I guess, or I'm not of that nature, or I disagree with it strongly enough not to consent to it. But the Mormon Transhumanist Association, along with the Christian Transhumanist Association, there's two religious organizations now. Both of them are doing, I think, extraordinary work in opening up the dialogue within otherwise probably religious conservative populations, and they're holding space for people, neurodivergent people like me, in parts of the world and online that might not have ever even heard of transhumanism or the many implications of transhumanism for a spiritually minded person.
So we were just talking about technomancy, and we were just talking about white magic or magic in general. And then we mentioned the Mormon Church. You know, what's fascinating is because we're already kind of in this space where we're gonna end up talking about the virtual space as a space of astral projection. You know, the Mormon Church, one of the critiques that is raised by some mainstream denominations, just like those mainstream denominations raise issues with, let's say, the Catholic Church, is the notion that the influence of Freemasonry had on the Mormon Church and Joseph Smith in particular, with the preservation of certain the magic handshakes and that stuff through the veil. What is your take? Because what's interesting to me, that you may have some feedback on this, is there's so much part of the New Age conspiracy world, that strange melding that seemed to happen or coalesce around David Icke, where it became almost like New Age spirituality became zealotry and kind of fundamentalist in a lot of ways. That they'll talk about so many things, and then they'll talk about the Illuminati or the Freemasons, and I'm like, the Freemasons kept, things like, the tarot cards and palmistry around. Like a lot of these concepts you have that we call New Age concepts only stick around with us because the all-seeing eye or whatever. Have you ever reflected upon that? Because you come to that Mormon transhumanist space, that you might have had an opportunity to contemplate or meditate upon that, or I don't know if you've ever discussed that with them, or you find that transhumanist community more open to the conversation. I don't know.
That's a good question. I would say two-thirds of the transhumanist population are open to roughly two-thirds are open to the involvement of religious organizations, and then a third of them, or maybe a little less, are pretty anti-theist altogether. Atheist, anti-theist, further than atheism, it's anti-theism, and they want nothing to do with religion in their transhumanism. Um, that's their opinion. I think I have zero problem with anyone wanting to get it. It's not even an issue of problem. It's like, how can I show my support for someone who is religious who wants to get involved in transhumanism? It just doesn't even register as an issue for me. As to whether or not Freemasonry and Mormonism and transhumanism, I have investigated my interest in transhuman or in Freemasonry. I thought for a while I wanted to join a Freemason lodge. I was invited to go to a ceremony at a Freemason lodge. Went, had dinner, uh, met the Freemasons, and I've done a lot of research since then. But I'm not really big into the consolidation of knowledge in centralized, definitely hierarchical, uh, relatively I don't know if I said dogmatic already, but relatively dogmatic institutions that definitely make you pay a price to get the knowledge. Not monetarily necessarily, but your energy and consciousness are sucked up by the egregor of that lodge, by the godhead of that lodge, or the authority of that lodge. You are becoming a cell of it, which is fine for some people. I'm just not into that. And I think a lot of transhumanism is decentralized, like cryptocurrency kind of decentralized thinking is very common in my experience among transhumanists. Just like morphological freedom, cognitive liberty, all these kinds of things that allow you to be and do whatever you want are, in my opinion, generally clamped and restricted in total movement by organizations like the Freemasons. And it's true that the Freemasons and that the supposed, I think it's the Bavarian Illuminati from like the 16th, 17th, 18th century, did keep a lot of information alive. I don't have the slightest problem with that. I don't have any problem with them keeping the information alive. If they wanted to and they thought it was a good idea, that's good, because we still have it today. But I work for the promotion of wikis, and I work for the promotion of uh, PDF archives that are downloadable for free, that are legal, not stolen books, not stolen PDFs, or illegally distributed PDFs, but PDFs that are given by the author or written by an AI that are just free to download, so knowledge can flow. That's the important part for me about transhumanism and spirituality, is that information and data needs to flow.
No, obviously, there's no, like, just because you're involved in a movement or self-identify as part of a movement doesn't necessarily that mean that any leader or figurehead or leading light or celebrity within that community you endorse wholly. But we just talked about the notion of transhumanism leading to freedom or increased freedom. But I remember seeing an interview with Ben Gortzel. I think he wrote the Communist Manifesto, and he also, I believe, he's the guy behind that robot Sophia that got citizenship in Saudi Arabia of all places. A female robot, female robot gets citizenship in what a strange, wacky world we live in, right?
Sure.
He was actually talking about that it might be the case that the search for maximum power, maximum intelligence would actually cause the transhumanist community to kind of go together, possibly into a kind of Borg-like mind. Do you ever think about contemplate that possibility, and whether or not the transhumanist thing could, your desire of where it could, or thoughts about where it could go, you have to take into account, the places where it might go that you might be totally opposed to. Also, one thing, it sounds like we're getting a little bit of feedback when I'm speaking. I don't know if you've got mic headphone bleed, or if we can't solve it, we can't solve it. And if I need to put headphones in, I will.
All right. I don't hear anything, but I did press a button on my mixer that has resolved that problem before.
Okay. How about that?
What's that? Oh,
That was testing it. Who cares? We'll deal with it. We'll go with the funky flow. Okay. So I just mentioned. There's a question on the floor. Do you think about that? Do you take that into your considerations?
the Borg mind, hive mind. Yeah, I do, and I from our position in history in 2021 to wherever in the future that manifests, from this perspective, I'm looking forward to it because I think it will be voluntary. I think we can turn it on and we can turn it off. We can walk in, we can walk out. We can plug it in and plug it out. Um, how do I say it? It's like a smartphone. You can walk away from a smartphone, although you're sacrificing agency. You can get rid of a smartphone and the internet on a car ride, although you're losing that access by not having it. I do think about it. I am personally extraordinarily excited about being able to access Neuralink as a technology, or not necessarily Neuralink itself, but the kind of technology it represents is absolutely something I'm beyond excited for. I how do I say this? I am looking forward to the technological singularity with all my heart, not as a specific event, but as a philosophy of the future. What kind of future I want to see is a techno optimist future, and I have a very positive mindset on that exact subject because I think once you connect 100 million minds together, the kind of consciousness that will come out of that is beholden to a new set of rules, and I think that's pretty exciting.
So, so I'm really curious because I want to just make sure that, because what I did was I went through this whole and took notes on this whole interview you did. It wasn't the sort of notes that I take because there wasn't anything there that I thought in and of itself. It's your point of view. I might not agree with it, but there was nothing that I thought was like, your statements of opinion aren't statements of, I promise you that this is going to happen, or I'm involved in a company that's going to bring X, Y, and Z to the table. So I just want, I so I developed kind of thoughts and questions to present to you, but I want to make sure that they have context. So you may have done it already, but just the degree of like, if you have an ideal transhumanist space, um, what is it, and what do you think we have to do to get there?
As like a collective situation.
As a collective situation or yourself personally, because I remember in this interview you had mentioned the whole notion of cryogenics as being, a possible route to make sure that you living in 2021, expiring at whatever date in the future, could ensure the possibility that you would be able to access this. And because we're talking about magic, what is this notion of like, pharaohs and stasis chambers? I don't know, that just occurred to me. It's a fantasy, so I don't know.
I've There's been very relevant conversation on YouTube recently about historical figures in stasis. It's like, will they come back to us? Will they? So, that said, um, what is my ideal transhumanist situation? Personally, it is 20 years from now when the technology arrives. Not the best that we're ever going to have as a species, but I believe within about 20 years there will be primitive versions of mind uploading. There will be interconnections between psyches. There will be there will be telekinesis type abilities, all enabled by technology, and the ever changing human nervous system, which is being ever more quickly changed as a feedback loop because of technology. The nervous system invents the technology. The technology is used by the nervous system, and that use changes the nervous system. And then the next generation of technology is different from that loop and feedback loop that continues to happen until we reach some sort of um, omega point zero. What did Terence McKenna call that? He called it zero time wave zero,
Time Wave Zero, yeah.
where time ends, where history ends, and we enter the infinite future in a moment. So I'm looking forward to that optimistically. Now, collectively, I think it's going to be a struggle. There's a lot of resistance to transhumanism. There's a lot of growing resistance to transhumanism, and it's the I call it uh, what I want to call them Luddites, but they're not all Luddites. So it's just an opinion, their opinion of transhumanism, and a lot of people are ready to resist it in their own ways. But some of them I've observed are very aggressively anti-transhumanist, and that kind of stuff. I mean, I've dealt with that my whole life. People who have kind of noticed something I'm doing or who I am, and made comments about it for one reason or another, supported it, not supported it. So I've gotten used to that kind of attention or that kind of response. But I don't think most transhumanists are ready for it. I don't know if most transhumanists have done the research into anti-technology sentiment that's growing in the world. It's not just in any part of the country, our country. It's anywhere in the world or everywhere in the world in pockets. It's growing among different populations. And I'm not well versed enough to know what they all have in common, except for their opinion of anti-technology. It's sort of this desire to return to 1850 or before, and remove technology from the public and give it back to a centralized authority, as if the genie will be put back in the bottle. And that kind of scares me. That kind of stuff scares me because I don't know. I don't know how far some people will go to try to stop technology, like the movie Contact. Yeah, the movie Contact. That I think was, for a lot of reasons, a prelude to what we're going to see, um, in some senses, moving forward. That's just my opinion.
Okay, so so there's a thing called the Fermi Paradox, and there's also this notion that with the universe around us and the number of Earth-like planets, that we would have seen or should have seen, multiple, intergalactic civilizations or evidence of them. And there's some questions about why we don't see them, and one of them involves the fact that, society, modern first world society, is by definition a heat engine, and that also we have the advent of nuclear weapons and the means to destroy ourselves outright. um, so when we're thinking about looking forward 20 years, isn't there like a real possibility that even if that we might have immortality possibly within the palm of our hands, and that for whatever reason, whether it's the agency of some god or some angel, who's responsible to say, oh, they're about to make the leap and make another multiverse. We got to squash this for good or bad, whatever their agenda is, or if it's just the nature of humans that, do you have any thoughts about that? Do you contemplate that? And do you think that there's anything we can do proactively to prevent that?
How do we prevent the fall of the Tower of Babel?
Hmm.
Again, basically, right? That's kind of the question. That's how I
Yeah,
would.
I think that's a better way to do it. I was all over the map. I think you concentrated it well.
Okay. How do we prevent the fall of the Tower of Babylon again? Because we were rebuilt. You're right. We as in technologically optimistic people are attempting to rebuild it in physical hardware form and software form and community form. So I guess like three different, all aspects of the Tower of Babel are engaged right now. There's cement being poured for the next layer right now in a abstract sense. And I would say that after doing all of my research for the last 5 years and my training and my networking and my exposure to different things, technology cannot be stopped, but it could be redirected. It could be reharnessed. There's two. If we were to take away technology, it would be utter, utter chaos. It would be unrecognizable chaos. So I don't think we're going to get rid of technology. I do think, though, that the resistance to sort of the techno optimist application or philosophy of technology is going to have to fight for its survival. I do think that there's going to be a lot of well organized, well funded, highly motivated organization and efforts to stymie human humans taking the evolutionary course for ourselves, and that's kind of what Terence McKenna was saying when he said reality is language. And when you can speak the language of the Tower of Babel, which was one common language for all people, you've achieved the beginnings of immortality, mind uploading, all the technologies that we've wanted, or that people like me have wanted since we found out about them. So how do we resist that? How do we prevent that from happening? That's a good question. I have contemplated that, but I don't, at this, to be honest with you, I don't see any good options on the table. I see the resistance to transhumanism as being how it describes itself as sort of like a tidal wave coming to the shore. And I do see a lot of transhumanists ignoring the so-called challenge of anti-transhumanism or anti-technology or anti-human potential or anti-human evolution on our own choices. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I want to evolve this way. There's going to be a lot of people that say, no, you can't, because it's our opinion. You shouldn't even be allowed to think that way. So that said, it's going to be, it's either going to be an upwelling of huge support that will overwhelm any resistance, or it's going to have to be transmutation of the transhumanist from within to achieve superhuman strength and power, in the sense of influence in the reality that we live in order to preserve what we're working for. So it's just, that's the best I can say right now. Is it's going to be a struggle.
So I want to ask you my question, and then already the live chat is obviously engaged in the subject, and they got some interesting things to ask. So I think we'll toss it there. But you mentioned, this Luddite, for want of a better term, though we don't mean to patronize or insult. Um, but we did start off this conversation talking about discovering you in the world of this kind of new agey place. And obviously, we already discussed the artificial intelligent black goo fear that's now being weaponized as far as the new medical protocols as being, we dare not say certain words. Talk about black magic. There's certain things that we dare not say for fear of angering the gods.
Right.
But this notion that the the devil the thou shalt the mark of the beast is now coming to us in the form of a syringe. Do you still follow the community or scene?
Definitely.
Definitely. Are you still kind of intellectually involved as far as like uh thinking about these things? Do you watch it as something from your past, or is your the things that made you engage in that community, in that world, are they still ever present in your life?
Yes, sir, they are. I feel I've educated myself a bit and matured a little bit in my interests, but the core interest is human agency, human potential, and what we can do with that. Yes, I am definitely involved in, or definitely observing and learning from the YouTube occult magic, new age spirituality crowd. I probably have right now 900 subscriptions on YouTube, so following 900 different channels, all that I can get my hands on. And um, so, yes, I'm definitely involved. And um, I have a whole library of books that I've bought recently. Since I got my job, I've repurchased all my books, and I've been able to start re-educating myself and continuing my education as an individual. So yes, I definitely am involved.
So I'm going to write down my note for my next question based on that. And then let me do this. Let me run through these. Some of these might be subjects that you're familiar with from the live chat. Some of them may not. But let's just give the community an opportunity to talk to. Let me just do this. Ba, 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 ba. So let me go to where I was. Let me see where we're starting here. I think we started. Chester Hunter asks, Bret might address the thoughts of Jason Reza Giorgiani and his concerns with regards to reaching the singularity. I will say that I have a good friend, the same friend that gave me my cat in order to assist me in my journey towards sobriety, gave me like five of Reza Giorgiani's books that I've yet to crack. So I'm not familiar with his take on the singularity or his thoughts about the singularity. I don't know if you are. You feel that it's something that a question that you could address.
I could address. I am familiar with Jason. Is it Jason Reza Giorgiani?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've watched him on New Thinking Aloud. a number of times, interviews with, I forget the host's name. I wish I remembered it in the moment, but the YouTube channel New Thinking Aloud. And from what I see with Jason Reza Georgiani's like Prometheism, and um, from what I understand, he's very much about helping, or he wants to move humanity forward in his own way. But here's what I'll say. I have no ill will whatsoever against any individual who wants to help our humanity, period, or help our humanity proceed into the future. But I did read one of Jason Georgiani's books, and in the first chapter of this fiction book, if I'm not, I don't want to get in trouble for saying this, so I'm just going to say I found some of the material a little distasteful, and I couldn't continue reading the book. Because it was, if I'm accurate in my interpretation of the words that he used, it's not my kind of material. But his ideas, like Prometheism, are my kind of ideas. That stuff I'm interested in, and if I understand enough about Jason correctly, I don't want to label him as being alt-right or far-right, but I'm understanding that he has allies in the far-right, which is fine. It's not a big deal. It's just where he sits politically. But he has made statements that are controversial that I don't agree with. And he has written some material that I don't agree with. But his sort of psychedelic, spiritual, technological innovation philosophy is right where I'm at. That part, I'll say I agree with.
And this is the thing. I'm not familiar with. This is the first that I'm learning that there's any sort of interplay. But like I said, I just know him as a guy whose books are on my shelf with all the other books that I'm supposed to read that I've not yet read yet, as I collect and buy more books. Can you give us do you feel confident in being able to not do disservice to tell us a little about your understanding of Prometheism?
That's fair. I don't know a ton about it. I know that I found it and shared it with friends recently. How do I say this? That it's basically a fallback or a call to who Prometheus is and what Prometheus represents within the human psyche. If deities are archetypes, like Jung would have implied, or something to that effect, then Prometheism is this like primordial desire to go back to Babylon. This desire to get to the prima materia of human potential. The philosopher's stone, I think, is what Jason Georgiani is trying to reach for, and I don't blame him. It's kind of what I'm reaching for too. So I think that's the best I could say about Prometheism. I'm not too familiar with it.
Right. No, I think you did well. Shooting down the live chat. Here's one. Obviously, if we talk about the singularity, and that is the moment in time where the technology becomes feasible and exists for people to upload their consciousness into the digital space and thereby ensure their immortality. That's my understanding of Ray Kurzweil's take on it. That's what I've always heard it defined as, though I might be using kind of mixed terminology. Here's a question from Lauren Henson who asks, Bret, do you think we are far off the mark from Kurzweil's projection of singularity by the year 2029?
That's a good question. Far off the mark? Not too far, but I think it's a little early. I do personally think it's a little early. But there is a caveat that if the rumors I have heard are true about AI and metaphysical contact through AI, then I will say that 2029 is very possible as a year of singularity, because the technological singularity will include human consciousness. It will involve it will involve some sort of radical renaissance, or not fundamental, because we're still going to be the same we've always been in terms of humanness, but a new chapter will be opened in humanity. And I think even Biden said it, not to name politician names to say I support or don't support, but Biden, who is kind of the representative of our country at the moment, has said in public that we are at a genuine inflection point in human history, like a big one, one that comes around
New
only.
World Order.
It could certainly be the New World Order. I have my thoughts on that, but
Right. Now they're gonna come after us.
uh,
You know what I mean?
I,
And
I
thank God it's not YouTube. We're gonna have to worry about all the people that are gonna call us Illuminati shills.
call me what you want. I'm not an
Throw
Illuminati.
things around.
I don't throw
You're
these.
okay in my book, Bret.
Um, but the question of 2029, if my ears are accurate, 2029 could happen, but I think it's closer to 2040.
Speaking of Ray Kurzweil, here's a point that I heard raised by Douglas Rushkoff in one of these little big think clips, and he pointed out something that a lot of the proponents of digital upload of the human consciousness come from people like Ben Gratzel or Ray Kurzweil, people that might be geniuses and great programmers or smart people, but who are not neuroscientists. And the question exists about whether or not there's fundamental questions about consciousness, what makes up a mind, to say nothing of the soul. That these people are kind of jumping the gun, and that there's a reason why you see a lot of transhumanist engineers or computer programmers or business mavens, but you don't see a lot of neurologists or neuroscientists involved. I might be ignorant. There might very well be neuroscientists that you can point out and talk about. But what say you to that critique? Ray Kurzweil's greatest technological influence has been in the world of digital music keyboards. He invented this thing that was like a creme de la creme sampler synthesizer called the Kurzweil 2000.
I wasn't
So
aware.
you know what I mean. This is a guy that's like, you know, God bless him. Did more than I could have. He's a better programmer than me.
Understood. Uh, so the question is, uh, repeat the question one more time. So I'm
So basically, is the notion that there are people that are talking about this the singularity being around the corner, and there's people on the other side of the coin that say, hey, these people don't know about the intricacies of consciousness. We have so many questions about what makes a human, what makes consciousness a consciousness, whether we have free will. There's Sam Harris, whose latest thing, he's kind of left the field of being a professional atheist to really being a big proponent of the fact that free will is an illusion.
hmm,
So the question would be is that we don't see a lot of neuroscientists involved in this notion of we can upload our brains, but we might see guys like Ben Grotzel, who's like a rock star in the cryptocurrency space and the general AI space, or Elon Musk or Ray Kurzweil. But might there be a big thing missing? Might we be way too early to start thinking about uploading something that we don't even know what it is?
sure. Um, the soul, I'm a panpsychist when it comes to the matter of the soul, and that means that matter, all of existence, in my opinion, is interconnected to spirit or soul. This water bottle, this water this water bottle has a spirit. Your water bottle has a spirit, in the sense that you can connect with it, and that's part of technomancy. Connecting with your computer spirit is sort of that. So if panpsychism, or if animism, is correct, and that everything in the reality that we exist within has a soul or a spirit of its own, that includes digital spaces too. And I think the missing component that really exists there is how, if the soul exists, would you transfer it in conjunction with the mind into a digital space? How would you make that leap from the body to only the body to only the digital space? I don't have an answer for that yet, but I know there are books out there that have been published that deal with that exactly, and they do kind of throw some shade and some skepticism on the issue. But I think anything is possible. That's a fundamental truth, in my opinion, of reality. Anything is possible. So if that's true as well, we're gonna get there. It'll just possibly take a while.
Right. And the other thing is that I'll say this as I'm listening to you, I realize there might be these questions that the neurologists and neuroscientists that are raising, or even the philosophers that are raising, that might very well be answered by these attempts to do this transfer from one space to another. I mean, if you think about it, it might be more significant than man landing on the moon,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because of the amount of things that it could unlock.
Mm-hmm.
To say nothing, intergalactic, colonization, which is funny because I discovered a lot through watching this interview that you did about transhumanism, because I had never heard of this other concept, this movement from like way back in time in Russia called Cosmism.
Mm-hmm.
And that obviously we mentioned Ben Grotzel wrote a book, The Cosmism Manifesto. Do you feel like before we go back to the live chat, which is pumping with questions, can you give us a brief? Because you had mentioned it yourself in that interview. What you think about it as a predecessor to transhumanism, or as an influence of transhumanism, and maybe even just because I'm thinking about this sort of notion of these tributaries going of these little creeks going into one big river, where we're now talking about possibly Mormon theology, and in many ways proto-communist or communist influenced, technological civilizations like the technate a little bit, how they are flowing and evolving. It might be, the the ancestors of the chimpanzee and us, just as they had no concept of where things were headed, that we might not have. It's only in retrospect that we'll see where we were headed.
Interesting. That's a really interesting question, or query, I guess. Cosmism, as I'm familiar with it, comes from Russia. It's relatively old. If I'm not mistaken, the original cosmists were Christian mystics, or a Christian mystic. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but they, as I understand it, had the cosmists, cosmisms had a major influence over Russian research into the rocket technology they used, as did the occult for the American rocket technology program. I don't remember the gentleman's name who invented the rocket, but
Jack Parsons.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Yes, Jack Parsons, the gentleman who's behind Scientology, and one other person were roommate. I don't know if you told me that, but they
Yeah,
were
no,
all
L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons in their attempt to do the Babylon working, both aficionados of Aleister Crowley.
yeah.
Aleister Crowley warned Jack Parsons about L. Ron Hubbard, that he didn't trust him. And it's like, when Aleister Crowley is pointing the finger at you and saying that you're fishy, baby, you're going to found Scientology. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a fair point. So to your core point, your core question, um, cosmism is, as I understand it, the prototype for transhumanism as we see it around the world today. I don't know that there are many cosmists left. I don't know if that's an active philosophy. I haven't looked into it too much in the modern context, but I feel transhumanists owe a great debt of gratitude to thinkers that paved the way at any level for this kind of stuff. And I do see many tributaries feeding into a single river that is leading to a larger sea of sea change, I guess you could say. That it is going to be very difficult to understand where that flow goes, but that in of itself, if we can look at the success of life on this planet to date, is something that I'm willing to undertake. The unknown of transhumanism and human evolution doesn't have to be permanent if we get to a place and want to stop or go back or change direction. We can improve as we go, and that's sort of the fundamental iterative nature of transhumanism, in my experience, is testing, experimenting, and growth. So I'm still optimistic even after all the things I've seen and understood.
Right. So this is we're talking about Luddites. Are you familiar with John Zerzan and the concept of anarcho-primitivism?
Anarcho-primitivism I've heard of, but not John Zerzan. No, sir.
He's kind of the father of anarcho-primitivism. I'll read this comment from Oswald Spengler. It says, the prominent Oregon anarcho-primitivist John Zerzan debated the transhumanist presidential candidate Zoltan Istvan at Stanford a few years ago. Is Bret familiar with anarcho-primitivism? And because that's got to be, because that's a concentration, kind of an antithesis philosophy to the transhumanist movement, I would say. Did you catch that debate?
I did not, and I didn't know it existed. I'll have to look that up. I'm going to write it down as we speak.
It's worth it. John Zerzan, he's one of his great works that you can still find in print is called "Running on Empty." He's an anarcho-primitivist, and what that basically stands for is that he's an anarchist that believes that, if anarchism is to be effective and be true to its agenda, that we need to roll back society and civilization to the point where it took a wrong turn. And he basically says that it's civilization, and I believe um, language itself, that really caused people to be enslaved by this system that's destroying the world. So if he had his way, we would rewind the clock to, I guess, just slightly before the advent of agrarian culture. So you can see how um, strict that is. So it's very interesting. I would definitely recommend them because if anything else, it'll just there are arguments out there that you can form, and it's just fascinating stuff. I mean, outside thinkers are great. I didn't know about that as either. Are you aware that there's a transhumanist presidential candidate?
Yeah, Zoltan Istvan. I have not communicated with him in person, but I have talked to him on Twitter and on Reddit. During the 2016 elections, he drove around a giant coffin made out of an RV so that he could demonstrate. I think he called it like the death bus or the something like that. So he was promoting immortality through technology. So he drove around this example of death, which is an interesting tact to say the least. But I think that Zoltan Istvan's work is personally invaluable. He's obviously well known among more of the population than almost probably any other transhumanist. And immediately, as I've seen it, he gets a result. He gets reaction. He gets commitment or not. And he's a large character. He's a larger than life character.
Right.
It's
What are his chances? I was going to say, well, after getting through Trump, we can't say that Zoltan. We might not see trans death clock riding Zoltan as the president of the United States. Then we'll know we've made it to run Arnold Schwarzenegger's Running Man, a civilization. We better get to the singularity because I don't want to live in that world. I don't know how to handicap a guy's presidential chances, but it seems like if they didn't like Barack Hussein Obama, I don't know what they're going to make of Zoltan Istvan.
Yeah, I if he's let me be candid and polite. If he is doing anything right now, it is not to become president. I don't believe it is to become a figurehead to move the transhumanist philosophy into dialogue, and that is what if he's going to accomplish anything, he's already accomplished that. His future is up to him, but it'll be very interesting to see what Zoltan does over the next 20 years.
Okay, I want to go through. I don't know if we want to get. There's obviously an expert in Giorgiani here. Um, let me just go through this a little bit. I just want to make sure. Let me just make sure.
Mhm.
I apologize. Oh, then we also have Alexander Dugin getting a mention. I don't think we can mention Zoltan Esteban unless we want and Freemasonry and political magic and not talk about Alexander Dugin. If we
Mhm.
want if we really want to kick rocks at proto fascists, something supremacists. I don't know. Maybe I'm not being fair.
If I'm not mistaken, Alexander Dugin is uh, how do I say this? A Russian political figure, but he's more of a mystic and
Right.
he's more of an occultist from Russia who defends Putin. Is that true?
Yeah, no, that's basically it. I mean, I tease him, I tease, but yeah, that's it. It's almost like a weird kind of modern day Rasputin
Mhm.
mythology around the man. That he's kind of the spiritual leader to, for want of a better word, or influencer to Vladimir Putin. Make it that what you will. Uh, One thing I wanted to get to, a question I wanted to get to, and then I'll go to kind of my main questions that I had. We started off. You had mentioned experiences with channeling at the top of our interview, our discussion here. Do you still? I mean, what's your take on the presence of either actual aliens or interdimensional entities and people's ability to contact them? Do you still engage in that practice? Can you contextualize that practice within the realm of transhumanist, your transhumanist evolution? These are question shots in the dark. These might be relevant to your journey. They might not be, but they came up, they came to my mind, so I thought I would ask them.
Sure. Do I still participate in? Did I ever channel consciousness? Yes, I feel that it's innate within every person to do such. It's basically an uh, exercised muscle in the spiritual experience of any human. That said, do I still engage in channeling? Not explicitly, although I I put much more weight today in simpler omens than I did in received gnosis or received messages. So I still communicate in the sense with deities and ETs and consciousness in general through smaller happenings in my life. I don't even use tarot cards anymore because I find they're too powerful, to be honest with you. So I've moved back from the big show of channeling to more of a intimate, oh, there's a penny on the street with its heads up. That's a good sign kind of experience. Or it's 11:11 at night. That's a better sign kind of thing. Um, in the context of transhumanism and technology, that's where the potential for uh, real channeling, real evidence of channeling, I think, to take place. But more of an opportunity for the average person to do it. Very real and very possible. That Reddit community that I described at the beginning of our conversation, a lot of the content that we posted there deals directly with contacting spirits of the internet. So it's very possible. It happens all the time among certain people, and it just depends on you if you're open to it or not.
Right. And then I immediately want to ask, there's this concept, called ascension or going to 5D, that I always engage with in the New Age community as basically being kind of an analog in the worst possible ways to the Christian notion, evangelical Christian notion of the rapture. But do you have any thoughts or feedback on whether or not, because it sounds like we might be seeing in this digital space this kind of place where you're reaching with this transhumanist movement towards the realization of some of these promises or some of these things that were occurring metaphysically in the real? And do you think that there's any sort of, if the fluidity of time that maybe the evolved transhumanists, the evolved, once they're transhumanists, they're something else, or the neo-human or whatever? Do you think there's any sort of possible reach back? I mean, if we think about the potential mental power and strength of general AI when it first comes on the scene, what would general AI be 1,000 years from the advent of general AI? And couldn't they just do all sorts of crazy things?
That's a very, very, very relevant topic. It's sort of like how do I say this? It's so far out in the sense that there's so much potential. If that scenario is real, which I believe it is already real, but if that scenario is ever to come to pass, the potential within it for change because of such an autonomous, super intelligent entity it's you can't describe it. I couldn't describe what those realities would be, but I do believe that how do I say this? The interface between man and machine is going to create the new rules of magic. That's what I'll say there.
Sorry, my office phone rang. It was a robocaller.
Yeah, don't worry.
Okay. So so there you go. There you go. Let me see if I can do this. Do. I want to about that. We did that. Sorry, I'm going over my notes.
No
I
worries.
apologize.
No worries at all.
There you go. We did that. Oh yeah, let me ask you this, bro. This is kind of like, so this is one of the things. So here I'm going to read it right off my page here. Implications of coerced, uncoerced digital cloning. You know what I
Interesting.
mean? Because if we have the capacity to upload a person's consciousness, first question, when I upload my brain into the magic machine, do I by default die, or do I have to be by default executed because some sort of philosophical belief? Or is there now two of me? And I say, my human self says to my self that's just been cloned or duplicated within the digital space, have a good one, brother. You're doing this for both of us now. And does the guy that wakes up in the machine say, oh my God, here I am. I just got totally transferred. Maybe there's just an enforced protocol of don't look back to see your old, you going, okay, now I'm going off to die. Have fun in there with me. And at one point, do they start building their own independent memories? Because we might very well be just a collection of like, I didn't invent the English language, but here I am, and my thoughts are contextualized by the English language and where I am and who I'm from and the genes that inform me. None of these things were really my choice. I mean, to what degree would all of a sudden within the first nanosecond of this process where these individuals start becoming wholly separate. I mean, one of them is existing in a digital space, one of them is existing in a physical space. And then if you want to tackle that, and then I'll repeat my question about the coerced or uncoerced cloning and the philosophical implications of that. If we do have a consciousness and we do have a soul, is the soul xeroxable?
Interesting. That is that is a quintessential concern, like thought process or subject matter. Um, okay, so your first question was essentially what happens to the consciousness of a human when it's uploaded? Is it duplicated? Are they split? Do they see each other? What happens? Does the other one die? I have honestly no idea, but there are books out there now that are starting to talk about that very issue, and so I'm starting to philosophize about it and wonder myself what happens when that technology does arrive. I personally would expect there to be two individual experiences, either that or there will be some, like you said, protocol that creates some sort of like software hose of consciousness between the flesh mind and the digital mind. It's going to be the most psychedelic thing that we could ever possibly imagine.
I just hope I'm the guy that gets the digital mansion and not the douchebag who has to be like someone else is living a fantastic fucking life. Thank you, transhumanist agenda. You know what I mean? Oh, I get a liver so I can live a little longer. Great. Some Grecian formula so I can dye my beard. Thanks. Meanwhile, this other guy's getting laid in the shade in a magic mansion that never stops jacking him off. You know what I mean? So, one other thing that you pointed out or that you talked about is this notion of, well, this is very interesting because you talked about in your last interview this notion of an ideal transhumanist space, for want of a better term, involving your ability to, go in and out of the virtual reality realm at will,
Mhm.
to be able to go in and then it also to be able to go out into a physical body to experience the real. You even went so far as to say to point out that, I guess, based on metaphysical experience, that that which is non-corporeal, that which is spirit, desires and yearns to be manifest in the physical space. But here we are in the physical space, apparently attempting to go into a spirit realm, for want of a better term.
That's fascinating that you would frame it like that, or that you would put those pieces together. I would have to stop and think about your last comment about the spirit wanting to go from physical to digital, almost as if my comment about spirits wanting to be manifested in the physical is true, which I do believe is true from experience and my research. I'm not the only one that would say that. That becoming a body with a spirit is winning the jackpot, winning the lottery. It's a very valuable experience for a soul. But to go from physical to digital, meaning some sort of relevant transfer or like reversion from physical to spiritual or astral, um, that that's a very fascinating subject matter for a lot more thought. I would to be honest with you, um, I would think that what we're about to create is the next kind of spiritual dimension, and I think that the spirit. Why do people die? That's a great question. Without giving an answer to that question, I will say that if religion and spirituality are correct and the soul exists and moves on, it's almost as if the body needs to exist temporarily anyways. So maybe what we're creating is a compromise between corporeal and returning to some sort of oneness or allness or um, spiritual afterlife. I'm not quite certain how best to answer that, but I think that's pretty good.
Right. And this might be repetitive, but I think that I want to go back to it. Can we actually duplicate um, a spirit that's been uploaded? In the sense that, if I've got a version of a computer program, right? That's a fungible good. I can transfer that to other people. I can make a copy of it illegally or legally. I can pass it around. It might be freeware or shareware, or it might be under some sort of open license. If we're thinking about a mind being transferred up, doesn't that kind of directly imply the notion that a mind can be duplicated?
Definitely. There are plenty of YouTube videos featuring people fantasizing about making a trillion copies of their consciousness once uploaded. Absolutely. Or I think it's called instantiation, would be the proper software term. Making a trillion instances of your consciousness and seeing what happens. So I think that's, I mean, if it's if it's thinkable, it's ultimately doable. So it's probably possible.
There you go. Just shooting down my list of questions. I hope they have context. I think they did. I think we had an in-depth conversation, so I think I can shoot through this. I can stay for a little longer. I'm not going to cut. This is a fascinating conversation. Bret, come back to fucking YouTube, my man. Come on, come back.
All right, I have a
Yeah,
YouTube channel, so I will do that.
that's it. I want to see your take on things, but don't go near Michael. That's
Yeah, I wish him the best, is what I'll say.
so do I. He blocked me on Twitter because he was talking big about kicking my ass in a political debate, and it didn't quite work out. But what are you going to do? That's neither here nor there.
Mhm.
Let me ask you this, because we're talking about this concept of immortality, and I want to be fair because I know that there's probably immortality, and then there's like effective immortality, like you live so long you might as if you're immortal. So I've got a couple of questions that are based on this. Is it even theoretically possible for someone to live forever? I mean, just think about Newtonian physics. If you're stored in a digital medium, and the digital, like we see digital media, like if you've got an old school floppy disk, you ain't doing anything with that. You know what I mean? I've got thumb drives and hard drives and iOmega zip drives that, find me a SCSI port. Those things, those word processing documents aren't going anywhere quickly. And also just if the unit, if the storage unit or the computer exists within physical space, isn't it subject to Newtonian physics? Like the sun goes, turns into a white dwarf or whatever, or just someone drops it in the water. Like, and then, I've got a whole bunch of questions. What do you think? Just like the simplest thing. And also this, I think as it ties into the physical hard drive, we talk about this thing called the Carrington event. And people talk about the notion of solar storms and the possibility of an EMP, basically nuking and wiping out all electronics. Wouldn't that be kind of a genocide against everybody who made the transhumanist leap?
Effectively, I'm sure you could argue that. Depends on why it happened and how it happened, of course. But um, in regards to um, the first part of your question was, could you remind me that one more time? The first part of your
It's basically like, is it even theoretically possible for someone to live forever? In the sense that, no matter where you are placed, that that item, that device, that avatar, that body is exists within the physical realm where entropy exists. Things deteriorate, things rust. Nothing. The Buddha says, "This too shall pass." So, I mean, yeah, because I mean, people could make a theoretical jump from hard drive to hard drive, but isn't there a certain point where everyone is gonna like kind of like? There's also the heat death of the universe, or the big crunch. I guess I mean then at that point, if you live like 10 billion years, like, are you gonna like, oh, like the spirit of me back on Earth will be like, you said you were gonna be immortal, Bret, but 10 billion years is not forever, so you died too.
uh, the answer or a answer to your question, I think, is that yes, it's impossible to live forever in this dimension. Although, if I rely on any of my experiences in spirituality to date and any optimism, we would have to break through the fifth dimension into the sixth, or the fourth dimension into the fifth, and become timeless. We'd have to, and that might be why we don't find any ETs, is because they break dimensions.
And that's also interesting because the New Age community, when they think about ascension, they're always talking about 5D.
Hmm.
I'm always like, what happened to 4D? People are jumping, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Poor 4D is like the Ringo Starr of dimensions. No love, no love for 4D, right? I always wondered about that.
If I'm not mistaken, 4D is time and 5D is timelessness.
Okay,
I think we actually live in the fourth dimension. Third dimension is time, or third dimension is space. Fourth dimension is time. Fifth dimension is timelessness. I think. I
okay,
could.
there you go, there you go. So I guarantee you that the majority of people that talk about ascension to 5D have no idea. They just know that it's 5D.com. Anyway, I tease because I love. Bu- 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 bum. Oh, I did that. We did that. Oh, check this out. Possible existential unknowns. as opposing arguments against, the desire for this transhumanist thing, this immortality quest. Uh, I'll do it in 2 points. I think because I got like kind of like two little. I have them in different places, of course. Um, Let me find it. Okay. So I got. So we'll enter this phase of the conversation. Um, do we need to age die in order for our lives to have value? Meaning that if we have effective immortality, we'll eventually, like, what is the value of something you have an infinite amount of? You know?
Yeah, I hear you. And there's like the Hindu or Buddhist mythology that says the reason why the universe got in the reason why the universe exists is because the immortal God got bored and
Right.
it did it to accompany him or her or them. Um, do I think that we have to die to have value in our lives? No, I don't. But I don't think there's anything wrong with. Frankly, I don't think there's anything wrong with death. I don't oppose death. I personally just want to live as long as I can. I honestly expect to live about 85 years, which is a
Mhm.
natural human lifespan. I don't expect to live 10,000 years. Although if I do, I made the right choices now to get there. That's sort of the caveat or the plan B in case I do achieve immortality, or in case humanity achieves immortality or unusually long life. It's the choices we make today that'll get me there. But to die, do we have to have value? We don't have to die to have value, but death isn't bad. It's
Right.
just part of the game.
And can we imagine that there are people that would make this transhumanist leap, but then after 1,000 years or 5,000 years would say, "Peace." You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? I've had my fill.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. They were talking about that on the Twilight Zone. There was an episode where a man had lived forever since the Civil War and he got bored, so he committed suicide or had someone kill him in the show. Because the exact same thing what you're talking about occurred in only 150 years.
Right.
His perspective.
And that's another thing. The notion of us as being the collection of our memories and our experiences. So when people oftentimes say, like, as you get older, time flies, there are theories that say that, well, that has to do with human cognition. When I was 5 years old, each one of those years represented 20% of my life, my entire life. So that's why they're so detail rich and they're so full of memories, especially considering that at least two of those years were basically a wash because I wasn't really cognizant or building memories. As I get to 25, 30, 35, 40, now I'm 46 years old. A year represents a mere fraction. If I tip a waitress the equivalent of what a year is for me, percentage wise on my bill, she would call me a lousy tipper. So at what point, even if I say I sign up for 1,000 years, at what point along those 1,000 years do the memories become so vague and distant that I kind of effectively evolve into something else? I may have the same name. I may have changed my name 50 times. I changed my body a couple of hundred times, tried it as a man, tried it as a woman, maybe some sort of like goat hybrid satire thing. Why not? Try it on for size. Then at what point is it that something is immortal? But at that point, aren't we just going back to reincarnation and the notion that the thing that persists throughout this is some sort of ephemeral thing that almost is just like a placeholder. Like it's not me. The me that I experienced is now transformed 1,000 times. I'm no longer whoever desired to be immortal doesn't get it.
Hmm.
It just becomes another series of transitory steps.
Very real, very likely, actually, I would
I,
say. Are you getting that feedback?
oh yeah, I'll mute my.
All right. In terms of in terms of what makes someone a human, is it their memories and experiences? I would say I'm not an expert in this level of philosophy, but from my experience and my opinion, I would say that memories and experiences and that which we can recall to identify with the past and I project into the future or the now, even, is only part of what makes us human. And that even if we did grow estranged from those memories and those experiences, I think we'd still be human. We would definitely have changed because I know not fundamentally different, but I'm a bit different than I was 5 years ago because those memories are in the past, and I've had new experiences, like you said. If someone has 1,000 different bodies, will they be the same person when they started? Um, I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know. I think that's probably fair to say.
Right, now check this out. In the immortal transhumanist digital space where you and me are rocking out in the year 3033, we can do anything in that virtual space we want to, including the fact that one day I tap you on the. Have you seen the HBO show Westworld?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. So here's what I tell you, Brett. I come up to you one day and I said, Brett, I'm sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of, smoking the bones of Elvis out of, the Rastafari God bomb. We've done everything. I've swum the equivalent of the English Channel without breaking a sweat. I've slept with Marilyn Monroe 10,000 times. I one time slept with 10,000 Marilyn Monroes. Remember that? That was Tuesday. Right at a certain point, I say to you, hey, Brett, you know what I want to do? Let's go on a murder spree, a virtual murder spree. And you know what? To make it really fun and to really freak out the norms in cell block 36, I'm gonna do a virtual school shooting. I wasn't there for Columbine, but I heard about it. It sounds like a real gas. And it's virtual reality. We don't need to worry about it. At what point does humans experience in this hedonistic thing? Because this seems central to Ben Grotzel's, attitude about it, this hedonistic imperative. At what point does our hedonistic imperative turn us into actual demons?
That's a really good point and a very important point. Um, because hedonism definitely has the opportunity to bewitch someone or to betwixt them into making mistakes. So my solution to that in my life is not hedonism, is mindfulness, and that would imply there needs to be a counter argument or a counter force to make sure that that kind of stuff doesn't evolve too quickly. And um, if we were to have a strictly hedonistic, transhumanist, totally automated, utopia, um, we probably might run into those problems quicker than we thought. People would run into those problems quicker than we thought. So there are going to need to be, like you described, protocols or rules, impossibilities maybe within that reality. You're muted.
Check this out.
Mm-hmm.
So the transhumanism evolved probably concordant and alongside the evolution of general AI. So these virtual reality kids that I'm planning to shoot up in virtual reality Columbine might very well, due to the nature of the program, actually be indistinguishable from living ensouled humans.
Mm-hmm.
That's some crazy stuff.
That is one of the levels of thinking. Like, what do we do about, like, here's, not to get too far down this road I'm about to talk about, but what do we do with digital pedophiles, or what do we do about with anyone who commits such an what do you call that, a violation of another? What do we do with those people in the digital sphere where anything is possible? I don't know, and that's a very important point. That's a very important concern. I don't know what to do about that. I don't know how to put the brakes on the internet already, let alone internet 5.0. So I don't know.
Yeah, because we're already dealing with that in the realm of deep fakes, and people talk about duplicating people and stealing their stolen identity.
Yep.
Say nothing of the potential blackmail of the guy who didn't actually do any crime, but here's the videotape evidence of him. Here's the gun with his fingerprints, what have you. Interesting stuff. So let me do this. Oh, so here's some more out there existential question. These are existential nightmares. You mentioned the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Someone else in the live chat mentioned Black Mirror. I don't know if you're familiar with that show. There's also, the Outer Limits. But a lot of these shows hinge upon these positing these existential nightmare scenarios, these hell-like scenarios. So I thought about a couple of them. There's a thing called locked in syndrome where a person is completely paralyzed. They can't even under their own will open and close their eyelids
Wow.
sometimes. Now imagine this. I mean, the one person who finds himself, a person who finds himself in with locked in syndrome or disorder, eventually they will pass away, right? Even the person, Terry Schiavo hooked up to equipment, possibly brain dead, possibly in some sort of hell space of pain. eventually that body, do whatever you want with it, is going to succumb. Imagine through some sort of mistake, like things break down all the time, and also people do some messed up stuff. Imagine all of a sudden I say to you about my plan for virtual reality Columbine, and you say, dude, and you judge me. And I say, you know what? And I trick you, and I shut you in a locked room where you're going to stay forever.
Mm-hmm.
How about this? Trapped in the void or a prison cell. I just mentioned that. Time manipulation is torture, right? I
Mm-hmm.
hit you with a whammy dart, and the whammy dart makes 1 second, even in virtual space, last 10,000 years, where you're just seeing the world go on around you.
Mm-hmm.
You ever read the book I Have No Mouth But I Must Scream?
Mm-mm.
So in this thing, it was written in 1968 by Harlan Ellison. Here's the concept. It's kind of like a proto matrix. The computers that are designed to run the US and USSR nuclear program end up getting into the actual fight and nuking everything out. And then they're left without purpose. And the one that's left in America without purpose somehow traps 5 or 6 human souls inside it. And it basically just tortures them for thousands and thousands of years. One of them figures out how to free the other ones by essentially killing them, leaving him by himself. Now, having enraged this evil god that controls everything, he finds himself basically in this existential hellscape where his mouth has even been taken out, and that leads to the title of the book, I Have No Mouth Yet I Must Scream. um, when we think about this notion of immortality, there's so many things that are fantastic about, but there's so many possible absolute hell-like dimensions. And then if we think about, if you don't do the right thing by certain religions, you're going to end up going to hell. How about this? God, the universe, Allah, Buddha, Krishna, whatever says, hey, brother, we told you. You know, we promise you. You live a good life. You're a good person. Then you die. Then you go to heaven, moksha, enlightenment, whatever. But you fuckers, you decided to turn your back on God or whatever, the demiurge or whatever. Pick your person, God, goddess, mother, father, God, whatever. So f you. You gotta live with C.W. Chanter for the rest of your 10,000 years.
What do I think about that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Um, that that's even weightier than just maybe being locked in a room. So like tortured and locked in a room for eternity or 10,000 years. The negative possibilities of immortality are just as heavy as the positive potentials of immortality, obviously. So um, that will, if we do invent immortality through the digital space, what you've described will happen to someone, will happen to some people. It just
That's fucking heavy,
yeah,
right?
it's really horrible. And if
It even happens to one person.
have you heard or have you seen the show Altered Carbon?
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
There's a scene in that movie where the main character gets locked inside of a digital torture chamber, and he's killed repetitively in this torture chamber, and that stuck with me because like, oh, that's probably pretty possible, like that could happen to anyone in that kind of scenario. So it's again heady stuff that has to be considered, and I'm glad that these kinds of conversations are happening now, even if the person or people involved utterly hate transhumanism. Their opinion is still going to help modulate or evolve transhumanism to something even better. I think that's, we have to aim for the highest possible good, because the highest possible or the lowest possible evil is also aiming for the same game. So I think essentially it's going to be a compromise, if anything. I don't think we're going to have a utopia. I don't think we can afford it.
Okay. People have come in and they're complaining about feedback, and I want to know exactly how bad it is. I can try and put a headphone in to see if that helps.
I could switch my mic.
Maybe that'll do it. I don't know. I don't know how me putting my headphones on would do it because it seems to be like it's, well, maybe hold on, let me try. But I don't know. It seems to happen when, did it do it?
I
Did it
think.
fix it?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I turned this microphone off, and turned my camera microphone on.
Oh, who knows? Well, I got the headphones on now. We're both like radio DJs from 1975. Talk about an existential hell. We can never leave. I already asked you these questions 10,000 times. Make it stop, Brett. It was
Please.
Michael. He got us.
Locks us in the room.
There you go. That's who cares about that. So okay. We think we got that. We got that. Oh, in your interview with the transhumanist interview that I worked as prep. Thank God I watched that because I would have come in here like New Age. Bret Bernhoft is a New Age alien contactee, experiencer, channeler, and you've been like no. But anyway, where am I? The soul can be damaged. Do you still hold that position? And there's people who think that the people talk about like triune souls, or the soul can be trapped, or things can happen to it, or it can be split up into numerous pieces.
That's a very old and very common and widespread belief among especially shamans,
Okay.
uh, whose part of their job is to do soul retrieval from or when the soul fragments because of trauma or stress or maliciousness or anything like that. Um, you might have to want to get it back, those pieces that you've lost, and a lot of that time it's done through uh, entering states of consciousness that you had when you lost it in order to kind of reprocess it, etc. I'm not an expert on it, but
Right.
it definitely can happen, and it's definitely something that is worked with in today's world all over the planet.
Now, do these soul shards become like holograms? Like the hologram will have the same reflection? Is it similar to what we were talking about with the possibilities of duping souls, like duplicating them?
Interesting. I don't
Or
know
would
what.
these fragments be, yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Maybe it's a conversation to someone else, to have the question to ask somebody else. I certainly don't know. Boo, 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 boo. Simulated universe theory.
Mhm,
Might the transhumanist miracle already have happened?
can
Also
I?
refer back to the astral. Oh, we got that. So how about this? How about that as a thought? That essentially, if we're in a simulation, then we're essentially in the digital space where we're imagining that transhumanism is going to take us. And wouldn't that be kind of the endless prison planet scenario that David Icke and Simon Parks posited? That we're basically trapped in this eternal loop.
That is very real. The simulated universe theory, I think, is best exemplified by a book that I'm going to share the name to right here. It's called Alien Information Theory, and it's by who's the name of that? Andrew Gallimore. I'll share the title right here in our private
Okay.
chat. Alien Information Theory. It's about what this man has learned from many DMT trips, speaking with the entities that he talks to inside that state of consciousness, and it's basically talking about that. It's we are in a simulated universe. The universe is a game, and um, etc. You can learn the rules. You can create your own universe, but I do think that there's a lot of validity to that pondering. We're in a simulated
Right.
universe right now.
And that goes right back to the we talked about the interest, or the with the Joseph Smith and the old school Mormonism theological concept that we're gonna, if you live your life right by God's rules, you're gonna inherit your own planet
Mm-hmm.
and be able to basically be God of that planet and do the whole God trip all over again. So that crazy mixed up stuff. I mean, I don't know if it's real. I mean, the concepts of cosmology or theology of ancient peoples, is it ancient wisdom, or is it just mythology and folklore? It's not for me to say. I wouldn't know. But it seems interesting to me that, like, you ever see the movie The 13th Floor?
I think so. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
It was a contemporary of The Matrix, and basically what it involves is that there are people in the simulated universe who did the impossible. They invented their own simulated universe, and it creates this like crazy, bizarre trip out. But it seems funny because it might be, at the end of the day, we might end up, if we ever attain it, you or I ever attain enlightenment, we might get to the end of that golden rainbow, and they might tell us, "Did you have fun? So you reincarnated in flesh a couple of times, and then you went to this amazing digital space and did that. Did you think that that was abdicating, or destroying the rules? Here you are. You finally figured it out." You know what I mean? Get off the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Who knows? Who knows? So this was the full thing. I said, might the transhumanist miracle already have happened? In the sense of this is that, like, all of this stuff, who knows? Who knows? So I think I may have gotten to the end of my questions. But we did that. Carrington effect. Are humans already? Are humans already cyborgs? And I think this all the time. It's separate from my body, but this device not only does it connect me to the internet, which essentially turns me into basically a walking library, right? I do this thing oftentimes. We're in my house. There's several air conditioner units that are out of my reach, and I can't see the number. I can't see if I've set the temperature to 75, 74, 73. I can't tell if on a cold night I haven't accidentally turned on the air conditioner instead of turning it into fan mode. So I turn on the camera and I raise it up, and it basically becomes an extended digital eye. I turn it on and I make it a flashlight, and all of a sudden I have essentially night vision. To what degree have our tools already advanced to the point that we're already essentially cyborgs? And the notion is that eventually what we're going to do is the final frontier is we just take this, a la Neuralink, and put it in my old medulla oblongata, my old cranium, and it's like we might already be there. But all I know about Neuralink is I don't want to be the first guy.
I'm on the same
Right?
boat. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Let them work out the kinks. I think it's that part of it. Like you said, in 20 years, we might have the beginning of this stuff, but it doesn't sound like you say, let me just take the cold ice bath for a while.
Yeah.
Wake me up in about 500 years and see where you guys are at. You know what I mean? Don't be the first guy.
Because you could get locked or lost or destroyed being the first
Oof.
guy. No
Oof.
thanks. Yeah.
No, thank you. No, thank you. Work out the kinks.
Yes.
Why are you trying to sell me a warranty on my own brain? You know what I mean? That's not, good. So there you go. So we did blah blah blah. We did that. I did all these things. We asked all the questions. We've been here, and I said I can only stay till 9:30. We pushed it to 10. Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel like we've reached a natural endpoint?
Definitely. I think we've had
Definitely. I think we did. Okay, so don't be a stranger, my man. It was great to see you back here.
Yeah, it was.
Now you know what's funny? My desire 6 years ago. We talked about time loops and all this shit. My desire 6 years ago was to make contact. That got aborted, right? And then here we are. Ain't that some shit? Ain't that some shit? If we're really lucky, Michael will clip the show. So Bret Bernhoft is back. He's talking to old C.W, that moron. Well, hope you guys had fun hanging out and talking to each other. So I guess if Bret does come back, I guess I'll have to just make some videos about him. I know how much he hates that. Still doing the old thing.
Is he still doing it?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
Oh yeah, there's a guy, you know what I mean. And we were friends, and I gotta be honest. Talk about a psychic vampire. You may have gotten away with getting bitten. I got away with turning into a vampire for a while.
Shoot.
No, it sucked. And I gotta live with it. It's recorded on that ones and zeros forever. The digital avatar lives. Okay, my brother. So what I usually do is I end the show by telling the people, I love you, I love you, I love you. If nobody told you that they loved you today, somebody just did. That's somebody C.W. Chanter, and I hope you know that applies to you too, Bret. Thank you so much for coming here. This was a gas of a conversation. This was a good one. You got a lot of good thoughts and ideas. This was a very intriguing interaction, I got to say. So I'll go ahead and end the stream. Do you want to say any parting thoughts or any thoughts to the folks?
Thank you very much for watching. And the only piece of advice I'll give is be a self-advocate. Help yourself and do well. Be well.
There you go. There you go. It's all in the broadcast at that point.